The auditor's office released a report this morning finding that nearly $77,000 was misspent at the Tama County Conservation Office by the director of Tama County Conservation, Stephen Main. As the director, he was allowed to purchase equipment and supplies. He also received credit card statements and charge account invoices, reviewed the statements himself, and provided them to the Conservation Board each month. On August 1st of last year, the department maintenance staff discovered multiple receipts from a Menards account held by Mr. Mays. The account was separate from the one that was typically used by the county. Department staff notified a county official about that, and ultimately receipts from the account indicated that Mr. Main had used county funds to make personal purchases at multiple vendors. He was placed on administrative leave later that day, and county conservation and county officials notified our office. We learned through our investigation that in October 2021, when the maintenance supervisor left employment, Mr. Main convinced the Conservation Board that those job duties could be dispersed among the department staff. This removed a layer of oversight and allowed Mr. Main to make purchases without the consent or discussion from staff. It's important to note that in this time frame, the department was involved in multiple projects. According to the department and county officials, Mr. Main was also remodeling his home at the time and at least one other property. They told us they believed the purchases were for personal use, but because proper documentation was not provided and could not be located, we were unable to determine whether or not $62,000 in purchases actually ended up being used for the department operations or for personal use. These were purchases of materials that could have been used on both public projects at the time and Mr. Main's private projects. We did identify several improper and unsupported purchases, such as a fuel pump, 50 rounds of ammunition, fuel purchases from Casey's, ink cartridges, and a battery. Reports like this allow our office to remind people in places of leadership about the importance of oversight. More than one person has got to be in charge of handling money, looking at receipts, depositing money, and running inventory on items that are purchased for public use to make sure that they are actually being used for the public. Happy to take any questions. Pretty straightforward today.
I've got a question.
Shoot.
We've seen these problems at county conservation boards before. I think possibly even going back to when your predecessor was auditor. I mean, why do you think that there are still these problems at the county level, and we're still seeing the lack of segregation of duties on these conservation boards?
Look, we are going to beat this dead horse as often as we need to remind people that they have oversight obligations. I think it's common for people to forget about those oversight obligations. But seeing examples like this should remind people on a regular basis that they have work to do and need to make sure they are paying attention to where money is going, and that not one person has the keys to the kingdom. We need to have our people in positions of power and trust make sure that not one person is running everything, so that there's someone else they can trust to be looking at them when they are spending the public's money.
Tom Barton.
Yeah, thank you for the time and thank you for doing this. You mentioned that a lot of the purchases are unsubstantiated because there isn't a lot of proper documentation. The report notes that copies were provided to the Tama County Attorney's Office, the AG's office, and DCI. I guess I don't know if you can talk about whether charges or prosecution will come about in the difficulties that may be presented because of the lack of documentation.
Yeah, good question, Tom. We have never gotten involved in getting into the prosecution decisions. I spent 7 years at the Attorney General's office prosecuting most of the cases that came out of the state auditor's office. It's a different decision. It's separation of powers. Our job is to investigate here, and we just don't provide comment on whether or not we think charges are going to happen or what those charges should be or anything like that.
We have a question in the chat from Kay Henderson. hasn't been able to read the special investigation report. Were you able to speak to the person, and is there a potential clawback of the $77,000?
We did interview Mr. Main. Whether or not there's a clawback would also be a legal question that would be one better asked to either the Attorney General's office or the County Attorney's office.
Last call for questions.
Yep. One quick follow-up. You mentioned that Mr. Main was placed on administrative leave. Do you happen to know, I guess, his current employment status with Tama County?
Yeah, he is no longer employed with the county.
Is that all the questions? Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.